Welcome Chosen X. From the instant you opened to the world, a quiet frequency trailed your steps, a low hum threading through rooms and settling into unspoken places. You felt at first as a small disquiet, as if ordinary air carried punctuation only you could read. People glanced up and found their words stalling, their rehearsed scripts unraveling. In those pauses you learned to listen. In those silences you began to map the invisible. At school the rhythm shifted when you walked in, patterns contracted and then expanded around the place you occupied, as if the room itself created space for something unfamiliar. Adults who had practiced certainty betrayed a brief uncertainty in posture. Peers who cultivated ease found their laughter cracking at an unasked question. You did not seek the effect and you did not perform it. It simply happened like a stone tossed into deep water and the rings traveled far. You learned early to hold a steady center. You practiced brevity of movement and clarity of attention so you would not be swept by currents that were not yours. That training was not taught, it was discovered in small experiments of being present without explanation. A single gaze could rearrange the direction of a conversation. A soft pause could invite confession. A refusal to engage in pretense often redirected the course of interaction toward candor. There were nights when dreams brought images of vast rooms lined with doors and each door whispered a choice. You stood in thresholds and sensed options waiting like tools on a bench. Each decision felt like selecting the right instrument for an unseen craft. The dreams taught patience and the discernment to tell the world's demands from an invitation to deeper work. As awareness grew you noticed how friction functioned as instruction. Critique and dismissal became barometers rather than curses. When someone bent effort into undermining you, it revealed an area where the world had hardened against the possibility you embodied. When praise shifted into suspicious admiration, it indicated a hunger for truths not yet named. You read human responses as data, not verdicts. With discipline you shaped your life around thresholds. You cultivated relationships that reflected rather than depleted. You learned that influence without exploitation was possible and that presence could be an offering rather than a weapon. In time you developed the capacity to hold openness alongside unflinching boundaries. That synthesis became your method. The pattern once glimpsed in fragments resolved into a larger architecture. Recurring motifs appeared in the way environments adjusted to you, in the tilt of conversations toward revelation, in the dissatisfaction unguarded observers felt. These were iterations of a phenomenon. An axis of possibility formed and you stood at its hinge. Now at the edge of recognition the invitation expands. This is not a summons to spectacle but to sustain attention. The work ahead needs craft and humility. It asks that you calibrate tenderness with strength and translate insight into steady action. What you practice will determine whether the resonance you stir becomes a bridge or a blaze. Keep your compass unclouded. Honor the quiet measures that taught you to wait and to listen. Continue to experiment with presence as a tool for healing in truth. The world will push to define you in simple frames. Resist easy categories. You are more complex than accusation or praise can hold. When lived with fidelity to what you sense, your life will rearrange fields of attention in ways that are gradual and irreversible. This threshold offers practice more than proof. Move with humility and steady curiosity. Let compassion form the limits of your power and persistence temper your tenderness. Attend small acts that accumulate in a habit. The world will follow patterns it can see, your task is to persist in what it cannot yet name. Rise and hold the small truth in your chest. Beneath ordinary surfaces something fragile is changing and the world shows its seams. You notice misalignments in public art and hesitations in casual speech. People seem to move by scripts that no longer fit when you enter a room. Where most accept handed-down narratives you begin to see the gaps and the half-built explanations. The sensation starts small and persistent and then it becomes a field you cannot ignore. Memories tug at your attention like threads that must be followed. Faces you trusted reveal cracks when light hits them certain ways. Conversations leave residues that cannot be swept away. Routine objects disclose doubled meanings and labels peel to show stained layers beneath. The ordinary accumulates evidence that something essential has been hidden. This revelation asks of you a strange patience. It requires learning the grammar of absence and the stance of attention. You arrive at junctions where choices are not binary and comfort offers a seductive false path. In those moments you cannot fall back on habit. Discernment must be trained like a muscle and courage practiced as a quiet art. At night the city breathes with a different cadence. Reflections and windows move before their owners do. Old incidents from childhood show up as small signals to avert larger failure. Everyday complaints begin to read like warnings. You learn to recognize rhythms that once escaped notice and to read pattern shifts as sentences from an unseen book. Ethical pressure increases as the veil thins. Decisions take on new weight and shape the field around you even when unnoticed. Silence acts as intervention and walking away becomes a form of testimony. Speaking can integrate repair and refusal can protect truth. You practice balancing influence and restraint so that presence heals instead of dominating. Relationships become testing grounds. Some people accelerate rupture and others strive to make the world sleepwalk back into denial. Those who hide truth specialize in charm and distraction. They offer consolation that sneaks into cages. You learn to see the architecture of evasion and to refuse its comforts. Your inner conversation grows more nuanced. Certainties that once felt solid soften into grief and invitation. You honor losses without pretending reconstruction can be hurried. At the same time you build from fragments. Lessons from pain become mortar and broken promises turn into compasses that keep you from worn roads. Small rituals anchor you. A daily inventory of intuitions, naming what unsettles, a single clarifying sentence written each morning. These modest practices are stubborn anchors in storms that test what you once trusted. They grant back a measure of sovereignty. The fracture is not a flaw to be hidden but a territory to map. Your work now is cartographic. You mark where truth is buried, where compassion thins, where courage has eroded. These maps are tools of care, not trophies. As you trace the breach, your capacity for nuance grows. Binary habits fall away and you begin to hold coexisting truths. The world grows less tidy and more alive. Each revealed imperfection brings the invitation to mend rather than to condemn. Patience becomes a necessary policy because clarity is a process, not a sudden event. This season will test your endurance while widening your perception. If you steward it with steadiness, the fissures will lead to a horizon of meaningful labor that requires the measure of your attention and bravery. In the wake of this unraveling, you will find unexpected company. Some arrive as witnesses who were once inert and now awaken. Others appear as architects of repair who bring tools you lacked. Trust will need to be calibrated and generosity will require discernment. Yet even the smallest acts of fidelity to truth expand the field and create habitable space for others to step into. Continue to map, to name, and to protect the places where light can enter and slow, deliberate repair can begin. Now, at this threshold, your life condenses into a luminous practice that does not require spectacle. You have gathered small disciplines like rare seeds and planted them beneath routines so that growth could happen without notice. Where once you reacted to provocation, now you choose response, and that simple distinction reorders rooms. Your steadiness models a new grammar of presence, a way of inhabiting time that repairs long-neglected edges. You are learning to steward attention as if it were water, placing it where nourishment is needed and withholding it where consumption threatens integrity. Each deliberate act of care rewrites expectations in subtle ways so systems come to lean toward repair. People notice these shifts even if they cannot name them, and slowly conversations reorient from rumor toward responsibility. This influence scales not through spectacle but through repetition and fidelity to chosen habits. You practice small rituals that keep you tethered, naming 3 priorities each morning, listening twice before speaking, closing attention to tasks that drain rather than sustain. These practices are not glamorous, they are the architecture of endurance. Your capacity expands when you protect it with gentle limits and when you invite accountability from those who will tell the truth. As you exercise restraint, you find that power becomes quieter and more generative. Sooner than you expect, opportunities appear that reward long-form effort instead of quick wins. Sites of care that once felt precarious stabilize under this regimen and allow deeper repair to emerge. Not every request is for you to answer, and not every crisis requires your hand. Discernment becomes the most compassionate gift you can give others because it preserves your ability to serve where service is sustainable. Boundaries are not refusals but a method of multiplication. They let your influence persist. There will be tests. Old reflexes seeking drama may tempt you to performance or seclusion. When that pressure arrives, return to the simplest practices that birthed your clarity. Name 3 facts, breathe slowly, and attend to one small generous action. These microsteps reset nervous systems and reorient decision-making toward steadiness. You will also witness loss. Some relationships cannot traverse the new geometry of your influence and they will fall away. This attrition is not failure but a cleansing that allows more aligned companions to enter. Receive departure with gratitude for lessons and tenderness for the grief it carries. As you move through these shifts, remember that accountability and humility guard against vanity. Invite critique from those whose love is disciplined and whose standards are rigorous. Let praise be received but translated into practice, not into identity. Your work is less about being seen than about making conditions where others can become more true. In this field, small civic investments compound into collective health. One honest policy, one generous contract, one restored relationship ripples outward, altering expectations and forming new defaults. Your leadership is service enacted patiently, and this patience becomes a living curriculum for others. Now a new transmission waits at the center of your screen, a filmed sequence that continues the work you have embodied. It offers guided attention, practical exercises, and anchored transmissions meant to move posture into clearer alignment. If you choose to engage, treat it as a continuation, watch with notes, test what is prescribed, and return with your observations. Enable notifications so the next arrival is an invitation. Subscribe to receive future transmissions and cultivate a steady rhythm of practice. Your ascent is not solitary, it progresses in shared practice where sight and sound amplify what inner readiness can begin. Enter the next sequence now and let the work continue with deliberate attention and generous patience. Return with notes and let practice deepen. Beneath the city's skin a slow unthreading begins and you feel its first small tremors. Where people move with habitual certainty, there are secret misalignments that make their steps hesitate when you appear. You are not the cause of these pauses but the witness to them, the one who notices the loosened stitches of ordinary days. In the quiet between exchanges you learn to listen for the shape of the fracture, to name its direction and to mark where attention has thinned. Memory becomes a cartography of soft alerts. Faces you once trusted keep fine fissures that widen under pressure. A phrase that used to comfort now rings like a signal bell. Objects you once set aside return to your awareness with altered weight. You follow these shifts like a careful tracker reading footprints across a field at dusk. Each clue invites closer attendance to what the architecture of life hides. This season asks for unusual patience. Rushing splits seams that could be mended with thoughtful touch. You practice holding still while the scene around you moves toward noise. Where others race to prove or to repair, you find space to breathe and to see the longer line. That steadiness becomes a skill and a sanctuary. Conversations take on the texture of confession. People reveal inadvertent truths when your presence steadies the room. An accusation folds back into admission. A joke opens into grief. What had been buried under decorous chatter surfaces into clearer water. Your work is not to harvest revelation but to receive it without making it your burden. You learn the economy of restraint. Speaking can incise and silence can heal. The tightest knots loosen when words are withheld and attention is applied with steadiness rather than force. You choose clarity in a few sentences rather than floods of explanation because concision protects and clarifies. As the veil thins, tests appear. Not all revelations are consoling. Some are mirrors that show your own unfinished edges. Old loyalties resist being recast. People offer comfortable fictions to avoid the labor of rebuilding. These encounters test whether you can remain honest without becoming harsh. Small rituals keep you anchored. A morning note naming insight. 3 practical tasks that are both useful and kind. A single sentence written to declare what you will not carry today. These modest practices are scaffolding for larger work, and over time they become habits that protect inner terrain so you can act from choice rather than reactivity. Allies arrive in unglamorous forms. They show up with steady labor and patient attention. They bring tools and durable presence. You learn to tell distance from protection and to give trust to those who are reliable. Trust becomes a refined currency, and you spend it carefully. The fracture is not merely collapse. It exposes seams so repair can begin. Where institutions had hardened by habit, the break reveals openings for tenderness and disciplined accountability. Small redesigns shift the arc of relationships and organizational practice into more humane trajectories. Resist turning every disturbance into spectacle. The work is slow folding, not dramatic conquest. Patience and craft matter more than immediate triumph. When you attend to small systems, the larger patterns follow. This is work that rewards endurance. Over time, your posture of restraint becomes contagious. People mirror thoughtful attention, and conversations lengthen with care. The field around you reorients toward clarity. Influence practiced as service alters default behaviors and creates room for repair. Keep mapping and tending. Fractures let light in if you are willing to mend with care. Continue practicing small acts that accumulate into durable culture. Your steadiness is the seedbed for future structure, and the quiet labors you perform will show in the repaired edges of shared life. Remember to celebrate repair and honor modest victories often unseen. These wins sustain arcs of change. Now, you stand at the threshold of revelation, a point where the echoes of every trial you have endured converge into a clarity that hums beneath your skin. The solitude that once felt unbearable, the absence you mourned, the disconnections that tore at your heart are no longer voids but instruments of refinement. You feel the weight of every moment that shaped you, each one deliberately orchestrated, chiseling away what was unnecessary, sculpting you into a vessel capable of holding a purpose far greater than ordinary comprehension. You recognize now that your resilience is not incidental. It is a testament to the meticulous design of a force beyond the tangible world, a presence that has guided each breath, each heartbeat, each pang of longing. The separation you experienced, the relational fractures that once seemed cruel, were not punishments but the scaffolding for your elevation. Every moment of yearning for approval that went unanswered, every interaction that left you questioning your worth, was a sacred teaching. They were the quiet instruments of a preparation that transcends ordinary human understanding, preparing you to wield strength and wisdom that others cannot access. You have become attuned to the imperceptible currents of destiny, sensing how each challenge was a signal, each hardship a call to align with a higher orchestration. The divine has drawn you into solitude not to abandon you but to immerse you in a clarity of purpose, a precision of spirit, an unshakable foundation of selfhood grounded in forces beyond human validation. Now, as you move through this final phase, the lessons crystallize into a luminous awareness. You see that the absence of comfort, the lack of the familiar warmth you once craved, was never a reflection of inadequacy but an affirmation of selection. The difficulties you endured were designed to awaken an inner authority, a sovereignty over your own identity and destiny. You have learned to rely not on transient human affection but on a love that is constant, infinite, and perfect, a force that shapes you without faltering, a presence that guides without interference. The isolation that once pained you is now the sacred terrain upon which your strength has been forged. You understand that this is where true power is cultivated, not in the embrace of others, not in the soothing of familiar voices, but in the quiet mastery of your own spirit in alignment with forces that move unseen yet are omnipotent in their effect. As the horizon of your awareness expands, a portal appears at the center of your vision, a luminous interface that beckons you forward. This is not a mere image or video, it is the continuation of the divine dialogue that has been shaping you since your earliest trials. The glow it emits resonates with the very frequency of your preparation, inviting you to step fully into the next phase of your calling. Within its unfolding is the revelation of truths that cannot be absorbed through passive observation. They demand engagement, presence, and surrender to the guidance that has carried you here. The portal is an active threshold, a bridge connecting your endured isolation with the next stage of manifestation. You understand instinctively that to move forward is to participate fully. The divine purpose that sculpted your journey into resilience, wisdom, and independence cannot be completed without this active engagement. The video before you is alive with instruction, illumination, and empowerment, offering not entertainment but the next segment of a sacred awakening. Your interaction with it is the conduit through which the lessons of the past converge with the unfolding reality of your potential. As you reach toward it, the glow intensifies, reflecting the resonance of your readiness and your willingness to ascend beyond the confines of past limitations. In this final moment, you are called to embody all you have endured and to step boldly into the fullness of your purpose. The screen's invitation is an integral part of the journey, a living extension of the divine orchestration that has never faltered. Watching it is not optional, it is essential to the continuation of the transformation that has been quietly, meticulously preparing you for the extraordinary. Your attention, your engagement, and your willingness to proceed are the final acts that will fuse your endured lessons into an unstoppable manifestation of your destiny. As the video unfolds, understand that this is where the divine narrative continues, where the full depth of your calling reveals itself, and where your ascent into extraordinary purpose truly begins. Engage now, fully, and allow the sacred unfolding to integrate into your being, knowing that this moment is the threshold into the extraordinary reality you were always destined to inhabit.